Is Prince Harry going bald? He's been losing his hair steadily for the past few years, but recently there were some rumours online that he'd actually visited a hair loss transplant. Well, did the former prince have a transplant? We have the full story for you coming right up. Hey guys, Leon here from hairgod.com, where people who are worried about their hair loss go to regrow their hair. Guys, if you're personally worried about your own hair loss, then do make sure to click the link in the description to take the HairGod hair loss quiz. All you've got to do is answer a few short and simple questions about yourself and your hair loss. Then you'll receive free, personalized, expert information on how to regrow healthy hair. So we've talked about the genetics of baldness in the past, and recently we even made an entire video on this topic, which I've linked to in the description below. Now the short and sweet is, yes, baldness definitely runs in families. And the more men in your family that have lost their hair, the more likely that you are to follow suit. And I have to tell you that Prince Harry does have the royal baldness genes. Harry's grandfather, the Duke of Edinburgh, started losing his hair at a very young age. You can see him in this picture with Queen Elizabeth when he was only 26 years old. He had a massive recession of the temples, which only got more pronounced with time. Though, in all fairness, the prince still has a decent head of hair considering he is now almost 100 years old. Harry's father, Prince Charles, held up quite well in his younger days. You can see him in this photo when he famously married Diana. He was already 33 and had a full head of hair, but by the time he had turned 50, he had severe vortex hair loss, which had only gotten worse since then. Though again, like his father, he's maintained quite a fair bit of hair on the top, considering his age. Now Prince William, Harry's brother, has arguably the most severe baldness in the royal family. When he married Kate Middleton in 2011, his crown was basically gone and the top of his head was at its last legs. For a 29-year-old, that is pretty severe. Eventually, the prince decided to shave his head at only 35 years of age. Now, rumour has it that one of the people that made fun of William's hair loss was Harry himself. Harry had a good run at it right up until his mid to late 20s. In 2011, as I mentioned, William married Kate. And while the media was commenting on William's advanced hair loss, we find the then 26-year-old Harry's hair being referred to as, quote, luxuriant. But 2 years later in 2013, we find the first mentions of Harry's hair problems. These here were the first pictures where Harry could be seen with noticeable thinning in the crown. Now, at this point, Harry was probably still at a stage where he could reverse the crown thinning and return to a more or less normal head of hair. Vertex baldness is generally the most responsive to treatment, especially at such an early stage and with such a young man. But we're guessing Harry did nothing, because by 2015 things were starting to get real bad, and at this point there was no more doubting it. Harry was starting to follow in his father's footsteps, with massive hair loss in the vertex and a deceptively intact hairline. Now things only got worse since then, and as the media likes to point out, his hair loss accelerated after he married Meghan Markle. And just a few months ago in February 2020, a story started making the rounds in the online media. And the story was that Harry had undergone, quote, hair thickening treatment at a post-London hair clinic. Now guys, when you go to a hair loss clinic, you're obviously going to want to get your hair thickened, not thinned. So the fact that Harry underwent hair thickening treatment actually tells us nothing. The chances are Harry got one of two treatments. A hair transplant, or B, a prescription for medications, which would probably be a combination of finasteride with minoxidil. This is purely speculation as no details of the alleged treatment were ever released. But right now, I'd say that he was probably given medication. We'll have to wait as more photos come out over the next few months and see if we can put the pieces together. And who knows, some of the staff at the clinic may end up opening their mouths and talking to the press. Now what's kind of sad is what happened to the prince was both predictable and preventable. When basically all the men in your family are bald, and when you see your older brother going bald before he turns 30, it doesn't really take a rocket scientist to connect the dots, especially when you start to see your own hair thinning. So there are two things that we have to distinguish, because these often get confused. One, whether you will start losing your hair is largely down to your genes. There definitely are environmental factors that also play into this, and these make the situation much worse, which is why hair loss is much more common in the Western world, but for sure genetics does play a large role. 2. Whether you will keep on losing your hair has little to do with your genes. If you take action early, we know that you can stabilize your baldness and keep a decent head of hair for an indefinite amount of time. This was proved in principle with the arrival of minoxidil and especially a bit later finasteride. Finasteride stabilizes hair loss in over 80% of men. So even if you have a very heavy genetic predisposition to hair loss, it can be stopped. And the good news is that you don't actually have to take finasteride or any other harsh medication to achieve this. Will, the founder of HairGuard, came from a family with a very heavy history of pattern baldness. His father was bald, his uncle from his mother's side was bald, and both his grandparents were bald. And interestingly, Will started going bald when he was only 17. He briefly tried finasteride but quit when he got the first sexual side effects. He threw away his finasteride pills and started looking at the latest research on natural ways to halt and reverse hair loss. Interventions that tackle the problem of hair loss at the root and don't involve any side effects. And Will went from this to this. You can click the thumbnail on the screen now to hear Will's full story.